I think I might have come up with a slight flaw in the calculation of the domestic division of labor when it comes to preparation of meals. It seems to me that if you come up with a dish, a signature dish, something that's your contribution to the overall repertoire of a family, and it's accepted, you're made. You've made a contribution that's not going to be forgotten in a long time and could last for generations. But there's not a whole lot of power and glory involved in doing the dishes. And it's not like somebody sits back years later and said, "Wow, this dish is just like the one that Grandpa used to wash." It's not the same. So when someone says, I've made the meal, and now your job is to do the dishes, I think they have to make some allowance for the fact that there's a little more power involved in doing the meal. And this has led me to think about one of the more spectacular culinary feats in the Bible. And this topic I know is going to trend any moment now. It'll become popular and Google searched and everything. But did Jesus fillet his fish when he made fish for 5,000 people? Because responsibly, that would be the thing to do. Just think of all the mess. When you see this in movies, it's not like that. It's like he's making almost live fish. It's like they've diverted a tributary of the pre-industrialized Columbia River through that basket, and the fish are just flowing out almost as if they're live, and they spill out of the basket in these copious quantities, and it's visually very impressive. And of course you want to have that for a movie. But what happens when people eat the fish and they're throwing away the heads and the tails and the bones? Somebody probably said, "Look, dude, you got to skip town because in 2 hours they'll be ready to crucify you for this mess." Who would pick up all that stuff? And that's what made me think of a way of presenting this question of how to deal with being called a god in the comments section. It seems to me that it's not truly a compliment. There are a lot of different meanings of the word God. I obviously don't have supernatural powers. Some of the things people get called gods for doing are just abilities that everybody ought to have, but people are so psychologically or societally beaten down that almost everybody loses them, and only a handful of people look impressive when they manage to retain them or get them back. So it's not fair to everybody else, and there's some resentment involved, rightfully so. But I thought maybe if I could find the source of the use of the term God in popular culture, maybe I would know what people are really trying to say when they use it. And I found one example of this in the movie Jersey Girl, which deals with aspects of divinity in several ways, because the main character, played by Ben Affleck, is a publicist. His job is to make people take on some of the characteristics of a god, being able to be seen in multiple places at once and to be regarded as a star. So his job in star making is to praise unequivocally the person he's promoting. And at a crucial moment, he loses control and is under a lot of pressure dealing with the difficulties of single fatherhood, and tears down his client in front of all the press. And he's exiled, professionally crucified, if you will, from his job, and can't hold a job for years afterwards. After a while, he thinks people might have forgotten about this event, and he goes to apply for a job 7 years later or so. And the guys giving them the interview say, "Are you the guy who pulled this stunt?" And "You're a legend, man," they say. We bow to you. They're saying he's a god. Essentially, he says, "Well, you admire me enough to hire me?" And they say, No, are you nuts?" This is ironic because later on, Ben Affleck's character goes and meets the exact same star he tore down years before, who was just a rising television star at the time and is now an absolute movie blockbuster megastar. So it appears that either Ben Affleck didn't hurt his career, or that in some roundabout way he might have actually helped it by doing something so unusual as a publicist that it gathered more attention than the simple approach of praising the client would have. So Ben Affleck is praised for doing something, but not given the reward for it. Something that perhaps happens with some of my videos as well. But it does not seem that he is really hurt his client, or that he is a poorer publicist for having spoken of them in the way that he did. Nevertheless, he can't get a job. So when someone refers to somebody as a god, it's typically at least undefined, because there are several contradictory meanings of the word. Some of them outright idolatrous. After all, you shouldn't call someone a god who isn't, according to the precepts of some religions. Contradictory, in that someone who's called a god may be doing something actually quite ordinary, and definitely not supernatural, or something that requires the collective energy of a large band of worshippers in order to accomplish. And even hypocritical, in that the admiration is not wholehearted. Someone may not be willing to back up their praise with action, or may be praising outwardly the person while inwardly saying, oh, I'm so glad I don't have to do that, or that I don't have to deal with the fact that if I did the same thing that person I'm praising did, someone else would have, like Jesus perhaps, a bone to pick with me.